The true story of the Old Wild West. Have you ever wondered what the story was behind the Old Wild West or the American frontier? The people who know all about it know that it is one of the most amazing things. And to enrich your knowledge and not deprive you of all these amazing facts and figures, we invite you to keep watching to know everything about it. And make sure you subscribe to our channel too, Country Facts. Now, let's begin. The American frontier, also known as the Old West or Wild West, encompasses the geography, history, folklore, and culture associated with the forward wave of American expansion in mainland North America that began with European colonial settlements in the early 17th century and ended with the admission of the last few Western Territories as states in 1912. Except for Alaska, which was not admitted into the Union until 1959. This period of huge migration and colonization was notably pushed by President Thomas Jefferson after the Louisiana Purchase. As a result, the expansionist mentality that came to be known as Manifest Destiny and the frontier thesis of historians were born around this time. The myths, historical events, and folklore of the American frontier have been so ingrained in United States society to the point that the Old West, and the Western genre of media in particular, has become one of the eras that most strongly defines American national identity. So, who exactly was the population who resided there? Pioneers, business people, scouts, lawmen, outlaws, gangs, gunslingers, and cowboys were just a few of the several types of individuals that might be found in the American West. One thing connected to the majority of these individuals, and that was the fact that they were open to new experiences and weren't scared of taking risks. It is impossible for anybody to determine with certainty how many Native Americans lived in North America before the beginning of European discovery on the continent. Yet, some estimates place the number of Native Americans as high as 100 million. There were 240 distinct Native American tribes, each of which spoke one of the 300 languages of the region. There are a lot of myths associated with the Old West, but none of them are as famous as the outlaws. Billy the Kid, Belle Starr, Bill Doolin, Black Bart, the Dalton brothers, Jesse James, Frank James, Curly Bill, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid are only a few of the most infamous outlaws. How about Bat Masterson, Wyatt Earp, Pat Garrett, Wild Bill Hickok, and Bill Tilghman, some of the more well-known lawmen that served in the Wild West? So what are the various consequences that might be imposed on someone who has been found guilty of committing a criminal offense? In addition, law enforcement was required to be carried out in the new cities. Because the government had not yet established its authority in many cases, it was necessary for the locally elected sheriff to carry out the duties. This resulted in mostly positive outcomes, but not always. Cities in Kansas and South Dakota, including Dodge City, Kansas, and Deadwood, South Dakota, for instance, were examples of temporarily unstable regions where the law was not enforced. Wyatt Earp was one of the many people who participated in the infamous shootout at the OK Corral, which also took place in Tombstone. It is a common misconception that people had no rights in the Wild West, but this is not the case. In order to preserve its power, the administration went to extreme measures, receiving assistance from the armed forces and the United States Marshal Service. Because rewards were being offered for the capture of the criminals, private bounty hunters became involved in the investigation. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency, which among other things tracked the Dalton Gang, is also a well-known name in this industry. These bounty hunters were often as ruthless as a hammer and would not hesitate to coerce witnesses or even the parents of fugitives into providing information via the use of physical force. Naturally, being a bounty hunter was a risky occupation in and of itself due to the nature of the job. With the help of their gang, the Wild Bunch, Butch Cassidy and his comrade the Sundance Kid, were able to steal banks and railroads with a great deal of success. They would often take refuge at the cabin that they owned near the Hole-in-the-Wall Pass in Wyoming. The gang's incredible level of accomplishment may be attributed to the fact that they meticulously planned not just the heist, but also their getaway as well. They are able to stay one step ahead of those who are pursuing them at all times. Because their photographs were plastered all over the city, they were no longer able to move about discreetly. This ultimately led to their demise as they could not avoid being discovered and slain. Two members, the Sundance Kid and his wife, deserted the gang and traveled to South America. There, they were able to support themselves for some time using the money they had stolen, but when they returned to their former ways, they were slain in Bolivia. Where did cowboys originate and why did they become cowboys? What exactly did they do? The American cowboy is a figure that plays a significant role in both the legend and the history of the American West. His real life consisted of the 2 annual roundups, which took place in the spring and fall, the subsequent drives to market, and the time off in the cattle towns, during which he spent his hard-earned money on food, clothing, firearms, gambling, and prostitution. His real life was a difficult one. During the winter months, many cowboys rented their services out to ranches located close to cattle cities. There, they were responsible for repairing and maintaining various pieces of machinery and structures. It wasn't just a profession, it was a way of life that reveled in the freedom of the fast, unsettling outdoors on horseback. Working cattle wasn't simply a normal job, it was also a way of life. Long drives engaged the services of one cowboy to tend to around 250 cattle. Although saloons were commonplace, outside of Mormonism, it was against the rules for cowboys to consume alcoholic beverages when they were traveling. Cowboys were often well versed in the skills necessary for their vocation, which included tasks like herding, ranching, and defending livestock. In order to defend their herd from wild animals, hostile Native Americans, and rustlers, cowboys always traveled with their trademark equipment. This included the bowie knife, the lasso, the bullwhip, pistols, rifles, and shotguns. Many of the cowboys had served in the Union Army during the American Civil War. These soldiers came from many walks of life, including African Americans, Native Americans, Latinos, and immigrants from a variety of countries. The early cowboys in Texas learned their job, modified their clothes, and borrowed their language from the Mexican vaqueros, or buckaroos, who were the successors of Spanish cattlemen from the Middle South or Spain. The word chaps, which refers to the thick, protective leather pants that cowboys wear, comes from the Spanish word chaparral, while the word lariat, which refers to a rope, comes from the Spanish word lariata. Every piece of the cowboy's distinctive attire, including his boots, saddles, hats, breeches, chaps, slickers, bandanas, gloves, and colorless shirts, was created to be functional and versatile with the goal of providing protection and comfort. Before a drive, a cowboy's responsibilities included riding out on the range and rounding up the cattle that were spread out throughout the land. The best cattle would be roped and branded, and the majority of the male cattle would be castrated before being picked. In addition, the cattle were required to have their horns removed, as well as be inspected for illnesses and given treatment for any ailments. The cowboys were responsible for keeping the cattle moving and in order as they traveled for great distances. Because the cattle were prone to stampedes and wandering off, they required constant supervision day and night. When cowboys camped out for the night with their herd, they would often sing to them to keep them quiet. Their work days often lasted 14 hours, and workers were only allowed to sleep for 6. The labor was strenuous and dirty, and there were just a few minutes to spare for leisure at the beginning and conclusion of each hard day. On the path, drinking, gambling, brawling, and occasionally even swearing were all activities that were often punished with fines and outlawed. The job was repetitive and dull, and the food was as uninteresting. Potatoes, bacon, beans, bread, and coffee. Dried fruit and fruit cake were also staples. Cowboys earned between $30 and $40 per month on average, but because of the tremendous toll it had both physically and emotionally on them, it was rare for a cowboy to stay more than 7 years working on the range. That's all, people. Hey, let us know in the comment box what you thought about today's video, and please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and thanks for watching.